Welcome to the Art Bazaar, a podcast that chats with artists of all types to explore the depths of creativity. Brought to you by the Alternative Gallery. We'll be releasing new episodes every Wednesday with bonus episodes dropping randomly. If you like what you're hearing, you can support this podcast by going to thealternativegallery.com and clicking on the podcast tab. I'm your host, Brandon Wonder, creative director of the Alternative Gallery, a nonprofit arts organization in Allentown, PA, run through the efforts of dedicated volunteers. Our guest today at the Art Bazaar is Glen Tickle, a New Jersey-based comedian who's appeared on Dry Bar, The Travel Channel, and Sirius XM. Glen has also performed at the AG many times, being a regular at our open mic, as well as taking part in live comedy shows. On September 15th, he'll be releasing a new comedy special and album titled Glen Tickle Against the World Crime League, which of course we'll chat a bit about today. Welcome to the Art Bazaar, Glen.
Thanks for having me, bud.
Thank you for coming. I'm really excited to have you here, because we've got to work together a lot in the past. We've got to even travel a little bit. And
that's right. We went down to Baltimore?
Baltimore.
Yeah.
Went up to New York. And we on all these trips that we've taken, we've always had like these great conversations.
I associate you so much with this place. I was like, oh yeah, we have gone other places. I have seen you outside this building.
Yes, I've sometimes leave here. Sometimes it's with you to far away places where you do comedy and tell jokes. And we always have these amazing conversations in the car. And I remember the one especially to Baltimore, we were both like, damn, we wished we'd brought the audio recording stuff because this right here was a podcast.
Yeah.
Both to and from each would have been, because that's what, a 4-hour trip?
Something like that.
That's a couple different podcast episodes right there.
Next weekend again, too.
Yeah? To Baltimore?
Annapolis. Which I think is near Baltimore, but my Maryland geography is not really.
What's happening in Annapolis?
I'm doing a show in, I think it's the Crown Plaza Hotel. They have like I think it's like a monthly club there now. I was supposed to do it last month. I wasn't supposed to. The booking agent booked me, but didn't tell me. So then I booked a weekend somewhere else, and then the club LOL Annapolis sent me on Facebook the request to co-host an event, and they're like, "Oh, do you want to go?" And I'm like, "I'm gonna be at the Jersey Shore that weekend. You guys have a great time though." And it was because he asked. He's like, "Hey, are you free?" Whatever the date was. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, all right, I'll confirm tomorrow. And then he didn't. So he just booked it and then hadn't heard anything back for a couple weeks. So it's like, well, I guess that didn't happen. And then booked a closer show. So I was like, tell him I'll reschedule. I would love to come down, but I don't want to cancel this other gig to, go do it.
You're doing a lot of traveling right now then, I imagine.
It's picking up again.
What kind of gigs you doing? I know you do a lot of colleges and stuff like that too, right?
Colleges have just started picking up again. I've done a few this month. I got a couple the end of the month that I have to. I have one show, one night in Boston, the next night in Kansas City. So I have to fly, which I don't like to do. I'm so worried that the flight's going to get canceled or delayed, and then I'm not going to get to Kansas City in time. And I don't like that it's completely out of my hands. I drive pretty much everywhere, because I do it where I will factor in enough time where it's if I get a flat, I have time to fix this and get there.
Yeah.
Or worst case scenario, I just find a place nearby to rent a car and keep going. There's things I can do if something bad happens. If you're flying from Boston to Kansas City and the flight's no, you're not, you can't, tough. There's no other way of getting there in the amount of time I have to get there. And I can't do anything about it other than ask nicely, I guess. But oh, come on. Take off. Come on. Just let's go.
Now, I like the fact that you do these college gigs. Can you kind of explain what you do there? Because the fact that you're able to kind of convince these colleges to give you money to come out, I always loved that so much.
Yeah, I do. Before the pandemic hit, doing college shows was my main job. That was 80% of my income as a comedian, because most clubs and stuff don't pay that well, and colleges do. And then during the pandemic, I started doing a bunch of corporate stuff, which also pays pretty well, but it's all over the map for what it college is a pretty set range, because a lot of it gets booked through these two organizations that don't standardize the price, but it's when you go to like NACA, which is I think like the one anybody who's familiar with either of them tends to be familiar with that one. There was an episode of Crashing with Pete Holmes about it. So you go, the students and their advisors who are on like the planning or the activities committee or whatever they're called, different things at different schools, they all go to like a Marriott conference center for a weekend, and they watch bands and magicians and comics. And so they're watching like 6 to 8 like full shows a weekend of like everyone's just doing their best 10 minutes. And then they all get together in a big room, and there's like a slideshow of all the performers. And when your slide comes up, if anybody wants to book you, they have a little paddle, and they're like, that guy, let's bring him to Iowa or whatever. And the first couple ones of these I went self-represented, so I didn't have an agent yet. So I had to be in that room, and it's the worst. Like to just, because it takes forever. It's like a 3 to 4 hour thing. Like it's so long, depending on how many performers are there that weekend. And you just sit there. They do one in the morning that's alphabetical, and then the one at night is like reverse alphabetical, or maybe they flip that sometimes. So you're just sitting there waiting for your slide to come up. And sometimes these meetings happen before you perform. So I'll just be sitting in a room with like 100 college students and like their advisors. I've not performed yet. These people have no idea who I am. It would be weird if my picture came up and they're like, yep, that guy, let's get him. I'm like, no one's going to book me. It's irresponsible for me to not be here yet. So like, I'll be here in case, maybe they saw a clip or something. But you sit there and then your picture comes up, and then of course no one books you. You haven't performed yet. Why would they? It still feels really bad when it's like, hey, anybody want to book Glen Tickle? And then just a whole room full of people's like, no, we don't actually. And that's doing that a couple times. Like, I really need a nice old man from Ohio to sit in this room for me. So that's how I got hooked up with my college agent.
I'm sure it saves you a lot of trouble. So what is it like when you do get booked at a college? Like how do the students react to your show?
The two I've done this month have both gone really well. My college agent in the last couple of days has sent me like nice emails that he's gotten from the schools about how the shows went. And they're usually really fun. They are sometimes not fun at all. And I never know what it's going to be going in. Like if you're doing a club, like you have a pretty good idea because they do comedy all the time. Like I probably have friends who've performed at whatever like comedy club I'm performing at. So I can be like, hey, Summit City Comedy Club, what's that like? And everyone's like, oh, it's really fun. The room's set up nice. And it's like, great. Then you're looking forward to that show, and you get there and you're like, yeah, this is a nice club. And then college is like, what's this one like? I don't know. Like sometimes you're in a beautiful theater. Like the last two that I did were both in like really nice auditoriums with like theater seating and a stage and lights. Nice. And then sometimes it's like, here's the classroom you'll be performing in. It's like,
wow.
Oh, okay. I mean, I could, sure. But like, there's not somewhere else that we could do this.
Did they ever like bring you out for one of these gigs and there was like no students in attendance?
Yeah. I did. I forget which college in Rochester, New York, but a school in Rochester, New York booked me on Valentine's Day. Didn't realize it was Valentine's Day when they booked me. They're just like, second Thursday of the month, we do an event. Oh, yeah. So at NACA or APCA or whichever event they booked me at, they're like, do you want to come on February 14th? And I'm like, yeah, let me just double check with my wife that she's not going to be pissed. But she's a very practical lady. So she's like, yeah, go get money. Like we can go to dinner on the 15th. It's fine. And so I booked it, and then I get there, and I like I said, I have a lot of travel anxiety about missing stuff, so I tend to show up places real early. So I get there like 3 or 4 hours before the show, and I'm just like hanging out in Rochester. Like I usually go to, I like find the exact place I need to be. Like if the show's at 8, and I get there at like 4, I'm like, all right, I will go to the room the show is going to be in, so I know it exists.
Get it off your mind.
Yeah, like I if there's like a flyer or something with my name and face on it, I'm like, great, the show is definitely happening. I've not accidentally driven to the wrong state.
Have you ever done that?
No, but I think about it constantly. And so the Rochester school, I get there, I have the contract. It just has like a person's name and phone number, the address for the school, and sometimes where on campus the show is. Not always, but usually. In this case, it had it. So I go there, and it's like a theater. And I'm like, oh, great. It's going to be in a theater. This is going to be fun. And there's like a play rehearsal going on. It's like, all right, it's a college. There's a lot going on. They'll probably be done before the show. I'm here early. So I'm like walking around. I come back to the school. Play rehearsal still going on. It is now like it's maybe an hour and a half before the show's supposed to start. I've still not heard back from the person that I texted when I got there to be like, hey, just let you know I'm on campus. And so I call them again, goes to voicemail, no response. And then the director, I'm assuming, whoever is running the rehearsal is like, all right, guys, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're just going to go straight through until 10. It's like, show's at 8. So I guess it's not in this room.
Wow.
So they take the break, and I check with the director who made that announcement. I was like, hey, I'm supposed to be doing a show here tonight. And he's like, not in this room. And I'm like, okay, just wanted to double check. And he's like, I don't know who to tell you to talk to, but we have the room all day. It's like, okay, not your problem. I'll take care of it. And I keep calling this number, not hearing anything. I'm like walking around campus a little bit. I'm like, maybe there's a flyer. Maybe they changed it. No flyers. Finally, 10 minutes before the show is supposed to start, I get a sleepy phone call from somebody who's like, hey, why do you keep calling me? I'm like, sorry, your phone number is listed on the contract. I'm a comedian. I'm doing a show at this college tonight. He's like, oh, I don't go there anymore. I'm doing a semester abroad. I'm in Italy right now.
Wow.
I don't know, man. I can't help you. And it's like, okay.
Wow.
Enjoy Italy, I guess. And he's like, let me text a couple people. And he's like, it's cool if I give him your number. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. So I'm just like killing time on this campus. It is now like, show's supposed to start at 8. It is like 8:01. Finally, a student calls me and be like, hey, we're at this room. It's on the other side of campus. It's like a small cafe. I know it's supposed to start now. We're going to start a couple minutes late. I'm like, no problem. I'll be right there. I find the place. I get there. There is no one. It is just the student who called me. And he's like, hey, man, we did forget that we booked you. I'm so sorry. And he's like, also, there's like 4 other major events going on campus because of Valentine's Day. We did try to like flyer some of the dorms this morning. We don't know if anybody's coming. And I'm like, all right, I'm here though. And he's like, yeah, no. Like, we already have a check for you. It's fine. I'm like, okay. I couldn't just like take the check and run as much as I like wanted. I'm like, I would feel too guilty. So I'm like, here's what I'll do. Show's supposed to be from 8 to 9. I will hang out in this room until 9 o'clock, and then we'll go. If anybody comes in, I will do my best to entertain them. And so he's like, I'll call like my roommates and like their friends and stuff. So people are like trickling in. I'm like, I'm going to sit on the stage and talk into the microphone so this at least feels a little bit like a show.
Yeah.
But it was basically just me hanging out with like 8 college students for an hour. I wasn't really doing material. I was just talking to them, not even like doing crowd work, just being like, oh, like, how come you guys aren't at the other thing going on campus or whatever? And then I, took the check and left. And then the kid who called me sent my agent like a really nice review about how much fun the show was. It was like, generous of you to call the show. I also had a lovely time.
I'm sure he felt very guilty.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So what, like, I know colleges aren't the ideal space for comedians. I imagine, a club's the ideal space that you like to perform at?
I would actually probably rather do colleges.
Really?
I mean, money aside, like I said, the colleges pay better. I mean, the reason that I've heard, club owners say is like, well, if they're bringing in a big act, if you're bringing in like a famous comedian, you're paying that person a lot of money, and then that eats up all your money that would go to, just the guy you got the next weekend. And it's like, well, don't do that. Like, that's not a good reason. But not like sometimes college shows aren't like set up well. I would rather do like a well-run college show, I think.
Do you ever go on tour with other comedians, or are you just usually solo?
When I do colleges, it's usually by myself. Before the pandemic, I would like bring openers, and now it's just like, I don't know, I drive ridiculous distances by myself, and I've like gotten used to it, and it's like, I used to do it because it's like, oh, I don't want to drive to and from Baltimore alone. So I'll bring my friend from the art gallery.
Yeah.
And then during the pandemic, it's like, oh, I don't want to be in a car with anyone for that long.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And I've done like a couple trips with people, and it's just like, it's easier for me to drive long distances now alone.
Well, in a road trip, it's so much about like the personality of who you're with.
Yeah.
Like if they're cranky or just checked out, or the worst is if they're sleeping and you're driving.
That I don't really mind if they're asleep. I would rather than be sleepy than like annoying. But I very rarely go with somebody. Like I think about it all the time. It's like, all right, how far is this trip? How much time do I want to spend with this person? And like, there's people, it's like, oh yeah, I'll drive from Jersey to here. That's like a half hour. If there's traffic, I'm like, jump in, bud. Let's go. Doesn't matter. I'll give you a ride.
You're still paying for your ticket though.
Yeah. And it's like, well, if I have to drive from New Jersey to Nashville, I'm like, the list of people I want in that car for that long is pretty minimal.
Yeah.
I brought my daughter to Nebraska last year.
I've done the Nashville drive. It's long.
Yeah, I think it was like 12
it's
something.
Over 12 hours.
But last summer, I got asked to do a chicken festival in Wayne, Nebraska. And,
awesome.
Yeah. And
explain that.
So my friend, comedian Pat Jansen, who when I started lived here in the Lehigh Valley and then moved to, I think, New Hampshire first, then LA. He bounced around. He was living in LA for years, and then the pandemic hit, so he and his wife moved to his wife's hometown, which is a town of 400 people in Nebraska.
Wow.
And he like got involved in whatever comedy was going on in eastern Nebraska. So there was the Wayne Chicken Show in Wayne, Nebraska, and he was like on the board or whatever, and they're like, oh, we're looking to do entertainment. We normally have a band. We think we might want to do a comedy show. He's like, I got you. He's like, well, I'll take care of it. And so he asked me to do it. And
so a Nebraska town of a population of 400.
No, Wayne's a little bigger.
Okay.
The town they live in is I don't remember the name.
Gotcha.
The town they live in is 400. It's like 20 minutes from Wayne.
I was going to say a population of 400 had the money to bring a comedian.
No, Wayne. So the chicken show is a big deal. It used to be. They have a chicken calling contest, and when Carson hosted the Tonight Show, every year he would bring the winner of the Wayne Chicken Show chicken calling contest on the show.
All right, yeah, this is sounding familiar now.
But one dude kept winning it, and like after a couple years, they stopped having them because it's like, we don't have anything else to talk to you about, man. You got this one skill. Look, you're really good at it, but what are we going to talk about? You're just going to do the thing again? We're like, yep, still pretty good at it. You still sound a lot like a chicken. My friend did win the chicken legs competition that year, where it's just who's got the legs that most look like chicken legs.
Is that really a skill or just?
No, he's just got bony little gams on him. And I was going out there, and I performed in Nebraska. I think it was this year and last year more times than I've performed in New Jersey, where I live, largely because Pat Jansen keeps asking me to come out and do stuff. But I've done like corporate events. I think last year I did a college.
So, but when you say corporate events, what is that? Like, what do? You go to a board meeting and tell jokes?
Kinda, yeah.
Really?
It is a lot of like hotel conference rooms where it's like these people have been sitting in this room all morning doing meetings.
And it's your job to bring some life back into them?
Yeah. And now I'm like the thing at the end to like reward them. And it's like,
Is there alcohol at this thing?
Sometimes.
Oh, no.
Sometimes there is.
That sounds rough.
I feel like the ceiling for how good a corporate gig is pretty low.
At least there's that.
So if you know that going into it, if you're like, I'm not going to blow the roof off this Hampton Inn conference center. I'm going to do my best. We're all going to have a pretty okay time. But most of these people don't want to be here. Like that's the challenge.
It's still work.
Yeah. Like if you go to a comedy club, people have made the decision, I want to go watch comedy. At my point, the point I'm at in my career, some of those people now are there to see me specifically, which I think is great.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure it feels
most
awesome.
people just are there to see the platonic idea of comedy, and they're like, we're just gonna go watch comedy. We don't care who's doing the comedy. We'll just go see that guy. But they've decided to be there and to watch it. Corporate gigs, they're at work. Like, they have to be there. The person who books you to do it is usually pretty stressed out because they're like putting their job on the line sometimes by organizing this event. And if it goes badly, it reflects badly on them. So it's like, you don't want to mess up bad enough that you get anybody fired.
Well, I feel like you're a pretty safe bet, just because you can do clean material.
Yeah, I feel so uncool. Like I have to do. So when you do a corporate gig, you book it a couple weeks or months in advance, and then at some point between the booking and the actual event, you jump on like a Zoom meeting with the person who's organizing it, their boss, and someone from HR, and they just like go over run a show stuff. They just want to hear that you're not going to be dirty or anything. And I'm like, it feels every time I do one of these, I'm like, it's going to sound really uncool to say this, but like I'm a pretty safe bet. Like I'm not. No one's gonna like be mad at the end of the show.
But I almost think it's harder to do clean comedy.
I don't know. I mean, I started doing it like more intentionally when my daughter was born. So that was 10 years ago, where it's like it feels weird to do a dirty joke and then a joke about my beautiful infant daughter.
Yeah.
So I like doing jokes about my kid more. So let me just do that. And then I was working clean most of the time anyway. So then I started getting booked for shows where they're asking me to work clean. And that's, the corporate stuff, that's the colleges. And it's like, well, if they're the ones paying me, I'll just keep being clean. I got asked recently on another podcast, they're like, why do you think clean comedy is important? I'm like, I don't. I think, honestly, I think it's kind of dumb in most cases. Like, doing like corporate shows or college, I'm like, these are adults. Like I did the one college I did, I always ask, I was like, is there anything specific you don't want me to say or talk about before the show? And that is like a way to give myself an out where like if I do say something they object to, I'm like, well, you didn't say before when I asked, that would have been the time to say, hey, don't talk about whatever. And the one show, and it's like an atypical response for this question when I ask it at colleges, was the woman who's organizing. She's like, yeah, no, they're adults. Like it was like incoming freshmen. She's like, part of this is like introducing them to the world. Say whatever you want.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I will. I mean, I even at my dirtiest, I'm not that dirty.
Yeah.
But it is like a nice relief to be like, oh, they're not going to get mad if I say dang it on stage.
Yeah.
I did a church show.
Oh, no.
And weeks later, a woman emailed me, not the one who organized it, just somebody who was in the crowd, to like demand that I give the church their money back because all I did was talk about poop. And I mentioned TikTok too many times, and that's the work of the devil.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, okay, I mean, you got me. I did a couple jokes that referenced TikTok. You're right. I didn't say poop one time. Like she said it 5 times in the email. I didn't say it once.
What?
I referenced that I was potty training my daughter.
Oh, no.
That's as gross as that joke got. It's just like, this was the activity that was happening. I'm potty training my daughter. Rest of joke. It's just like the setting.
And isn't that actually a clip that you just posted that went viral? The potty training.
So
bit?
the potty training joke was during the pandemic. I was potty training my youngest daughter, and I did a joke about it on TikTok because we were doing like the sticker chart thing. So I showed her chart, and then I showed my sticker chart, which I put like 40 stickers on. And it's stupid. And that video got 3 million views when I put it up initially. I just reposted it 2 days ago, and it's gonna hit 3 million again. And it's like, why this one? Like, it was such like a throw off, because it's like I had the thought, because I had to make her. I was helping her make the potty chart because we like printed one out, and she's like, no, and she wanted to like make one. So I made one for her with her, and then I'm like, oh, I should do this. I'll show hers and then I'll show mine and I'll have a bunch of stickers on it. It'll be hilarious. And it is like, it's a good joke. I'm not saying it's a bad, but like, I don't know why.
That's not the material you were hoping would get that traction.
Correct. I don't know why TikTok's like, this is the one. We're going to show this to we're going to show it to 3 million people 2 separate times.
I think, let's be honest, I think it speaks a lot of the users of TikTok.
Maybe.
It does. That's what they're craving.
But then that became a joke in the new special I talk about. I'm like, just kind of the fact that video blew up more than anything else I've ever done. Like, I have a dry bar special that when they put it on YouTube, hit 1 million views. So it's a lot. But now I'm like, well, yeah, but that's 1/3 of the people, now 1/6 of the people who have seen this dumb potty training video. And I try so hard to do like stand up and to make it good and to, get a good video and put those clips up. And then some of my biggest, and some stand-up clips have done pretty well. I've got like a couple that are like between 500,000 and 1 million. I think the only ones that have ever broken 1 million are that potty training video. And then it's not even a joke. It's just like me talking about being sad that my dog died. And then I present the rabbit that my wife bought my daughter like 2 days after my dog died. And like, I just hold the rabbit up. I think the joke part of it is I'm being like very sincere. And I was like, because I was genuinely like pretty upset that my dog died. But it's like a 1-minute-long video, and then the last 2 seconds is I just like lift this rabbit up out of the frame. So the joke to me is I've been holding this rabbit this whole time. It's like a magic trick because I had to do a couple takes of it because the rabbit was not cooperating. Rabbits don't really love being held.
Sure.
So I'm like holding her, and we just got her. She wasn't like used to us yet. So I'm like trying to, gently hold this rabbit just out of frame so that I can like pop her up at the very end. And that I think got just under 2 million.
Wow.
It's like, why that one? Like,
so the new special, how many specials have you done now?
I have done, this will be my 3rd. It's some of them, it's like, does this count? Is this? Because I think my first album I did in 2016, there is video of it, but I wouldn't call it a special because I had my friend Dan Marr, they came and just had a camera. So they asked her like, oh, do you want me to just like bring my camera and film it? And I was like, yeah, if you don't mind, that would be great. And they did. So there's like one camera angle of an hour of comedy, and it's exhausting to watch that.
Yeah.
But those are the clips that have done probably the best like stand up on TikTok for me, have been clips from that video. Like, it works to just pull, a minute out here and there. But then I wouldn't want to watch it for an hour, and I love watching me more than anyone does.
And then was Good Grief, was that the one after that one then?
Yeah, that was, we shot that, that was December 2019, I think.
Yeah, in Brooklyn in the
yeah, so that was my first like hour special. Then like 2 weeks after that was when I flew out to Utah to do my dry bar special. So I released Good Grief, I think it was like maybe February 2020, either like right before the start of the pandemic or like right after. Not great timing, but out of my hands. And then dry bar like sat on it for like a year and a half. So we filmed it January 2020, came out July 2021. And I'm like, that's fine. I wasn't touring in 2020. Like, part of the benefit and even like the reason to do specials is like, oh, then people who haven't seen you can like watch the video. And then when you're in their town, they will come and watch you do it live. So when you have something coming out, that's when you're out, doing podcasts to talk about it, or you're going to do shows to like promote it. So I'm like, sit on it all you want. Like, I'm not going anywhere. Yeah. And then it came out July 2021 when like numbers were down and things were opening again. It's like, yeah, this is great. Because then pretty quickly, because dry bar is like very clean, that's when I started booking like a ton of corporate stuff. I'd done like some before that, but this was like, I've got offers coming in all over.
It put you on the corporate map.
It's great because they're like, oh, this guy can talk for half an hour without, saying anything that basically anyone except for that one church lady is going to object to. You're hired, kid. Because I think that's their main concern in corporate. Well, like when you're getting booked as a corporate comedian, they just don't want a problem. Like, if you're funny, great. They just don't want to like have to have a meeting afterwards.
You don't want to upset Linda in HR.
Yeah, and I think that's why those shows tend to not be that fun. Because like the goal is not put on the funniest, best comedy show. Colleges sometimes can be, but the problem is like they're run by college students most of the time who don't know how to do it. So part of their college experience of being on the student activities board is like learning how to put on an event. So that is another reason I tend to get places early, is because like if I get there and I see it's like set up the worst possible way, I'd be like, oh, hey, look, this is your event. Do what you want. Here's my suggestion on some stuff to change. This will go better. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh yeah, thanks. That makes sense. And because they're like, this person is a professional who does this all the time. I'm 19 and this is the first event I'm producing. Yeah, I'll probably take their word that we should do it this way. Sometimes they're like pretty obstinate and they're like, no,
wow.
This is how it's getting done. I did a country club in Wisconsin 2 months ago, and everything about it was set up wrong. They gave my agent the wrong time, so I showed up what I thought was an hour early, but I showed up when the show was supposed to start, but it was for golfers like as they were coming in, but they weren't done with the round yet. So the woman's like yelling at me as soon as I get there. She's like, you're late. I'm like, oh, sorry. Agent told me 7. I'm here at 6. So I thought, and she's like, no, it's supposed to start at 6, but the golfers aren't done yet. So I'm like, all right, well, then calm down. Like, why are you yelling? Also, I'm an adult. Don't talk to me like that. And she shows me the setup, and I'm supposed to be like entertaining them as they come in off the golf course and then line up at the buffet.
It's really weird.
And I'm like, you wanted a band. That's what you wanted.
Yeah, wrong kind of entertainment.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't, it's not, maybe if I was like a one-liner comic, I'm like, I'm not.
A comedy show is a very active listening experience.
Yeah, I'm like, I got like longish stories that reference each other. Like if I need people sitting and looking at me. So I'm like, she's like, no, you're going to be telling them jokes. I'm like, well, how about we let them do that, and then I will tell them jokes while they're eating, which is the thing a lot of comics hate. I'm like, I genuinely don't mind. If they're sitting down, I don't care. Because during the pandemic, I've done so many weird, bad shows that's like, I don't care anymore. Like my expectations for what a show needs to be are gone. I've done shows on Zoom where everyone is muted and their camera is off, and I'm just talking to silence.
Wow.
And it's like, I don't know. I can't imagine this is fun for you.
Nothing to feed off
but
of.
It's the first show I did during the pandemic was a college gig that canceled initially because everything was shutting down. And this was like early on, because this was, I think, like March 2020. And it's a school I'd done before. So they're like, hey, we're still going to do the show. Like, if you can do the show virtually, we'll do it, but don't come to campus. They're like, we haven't shut down yet, but like by the time you leave to drive here, it'll probably happen. So they had a link that students could watch from their rooms, or it was like being broadcast, I think, in the theater. I did it in last year. But they wanted it over YouTube Live. So I'm like, okay, but then I don't have any like feedback. Like I won't be able to see or hear you guys. And they're like, well, the chat will be open if anybody wants to like put anything. I'm like, yeah, but that's different, right? Like so I did it, and it was just like me sweating it out in my living room. It was the first virtual show I think I'd probably ever done.
Did you record these?
Yes, that one I did.
Are they posted anywhere that people could see?
No.
Because it's kind of a unique look into an odd time.
I haven't looked back on it. It was YouTube Live, so it got logged on there. I think still. It's probably.
Make sure you keep it for the Glen Tickle documentary.
I'll have to check. That's what I want to do next, actually.
Documentary.
Is I'm trying to get Hungarian citizenship, and so part of that is like I want to go do a show in Budapest and film it, and but to get Hungarian citizenship, I have to learn the language, which is really hard, especially because like I'm not good at. I took French in high school for 4 years. I don't know any of it. Like I don't.
La guerre sans mange.
Yeah, I'm like I'm smart about a lot of things. Languages is not one of them. And Hungarian is like a really hard language to learn for native English speakers.
So what motivated you to do this?
My great-grandparents are from Hungary. And when I found out that because of that I qualify for Hungarian citizenship, it was like a couple months before I turned 40, and it's like, this seems like as good of a, midlife crisis as anything. Like,
it's a pretty great one, actually.
Especially like during the pandemic, because it was before I was like touring a lot again, so it's like I have a lot of time, and
So on your road trips, are you practicing Hungarian?
again, yeah. I'm trying, and part of the problem is like all the apps and stuff. Most of them don't have it as an option because it's not a popular language. Very few people are trying to pick this one up. So it's on Duolingo, which I do every day, but it just feels like a game that uses Hungarian words. So like, I don't feel like I'm learning a ton from it. It's like I think if I did Duolingo French, I think a lot of it would come back to me pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But
starting from scratch though.
Yeah. And it's so the apps that do have it, I've been like bouncing around those to try to like pick it up. I am in the process of ordering a language book from Hungary, like written specifically for people trying to because you have to do an interview in Hungarian, like specifically to get ready for that interview. The problem is like, I don't know how to send money to do it. Because it wasn't like listed on Amazon. It was a Hungarian language account that I follow. This woman wrote the book, and she's like, send a message to this email address, and then I'll send you the invoice. But it's like just all the Hungarian bank information. It's like, oh, I don't know what to do with this.
Wow.
Actually,
wow,
and
it's really crazy.
Yeah, so
you can't do PayPal.
That's what I thought. I figured it would be that. I would like Venmo her, however many forints she wanted.
You take Apple Pay.
And it's like, no, that's not how it works, apparently.
Wow.
So I'm like, oh, I got to figure this out. And then I saw it, and like shipping it is twice as expensive as the book itself.
Well, that makes sense.
And it's like, yeah. I mean, it's still like, it's not a crazy amount. It's just like, I don't know how to get her that amount of money.
So one of the things I love about comedy, we had the open mic here for a long time, and there was a wide variety of comedians that came out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you're more on the clean side. We had some extremely vulgar guys coming out too. Like, what do you think about one of the things being said now about how because of the state of society that people can't be dirty anymore, that vulgar comedy isn't really a thing? Do you think that's true?
No. As a guy who watches a lot of comedy, a lot of it's pretty vulgar. Cliff Nestoroff is an author who does books about like the history of comedy. The first one he did, I think, is called The Comedians, and there's like a really long subtitle, and it's like the history of stand-up back to like Frank Fay in vaudeville. Wow. And it's a great book. I highly recommend it. He did another one about Native American and I think Canadian comedy. Guys like Charlie Hill, I think is his name. Was like a guy who was like big in the Carson days and then just like is largely forgotten now. But when Twitter was still a thing that people used, Cliff did he would occasionally do like just long chains of tweets where he would screenshot quotes from comedians of different decades being like, you just can't say anything anymore. And he goes back to like the 1800s.
Wow.
And it's like, yeah, it's not like a new idea. Everyone's like, oh, but people are too sensitive to these. People have always been saying that.
Yeah.
Or the idea that like, you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today. Well, I mean, because if you did, all the right-wing dickheads would be mad because it's satire. It's making fun of them.
Yeah.
They're like,
you're
not supposed to identify with Slim Pickens and be like, he's making a lot of good points. Like, it is satirizing racism, admittedly, in a way that's a little sloppy because it was made 50 years ago.
Well, I feel like most often when someone is the, focus of satire, it's just right over their head.
Yeah. And that's the people saying that I don't think understand Blazing Saddles.
Well, it's
they are not the heroes of that story.
And the same is true, not even just with comedy. I mean, you see this ongoing discussion about Fight Club where people they don't get it.
Yeah, yeah. The moral of that movie isn't for him. Go and beat up your friends in a basement.
No,
it is. But yeah, I mean, even the whole idea of being like, oh, comedians are getting canceled. No, they're not. Louis C.K.'s selling out stadiums.
He's just not on TV.
Yeah, and he will be. It's only a matter of time.
I think so too. Yeah.
And I mean, Chappelle's still on Netflix.
Well, controversy, brings a lot of attention towards things, and sometimes in situations like that, people like to spite support.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I started working clean, and then that was going well, and I started getting paid more the times that I would work clean, I leaned into it, and I think to an extent that's probably true for a lot of these guys as well. Where like, if you mess up and you have a bunch of people mad at you, and then there's another group of people who are like, nah, man, it's cool. We got you. Come on. And then like that's who you're going to start playing to. So, I mean, I don't know that that's a big factor in any of, the cases of like comedians getting canceled and then taking like a weird right wing turn, but I'm sure it's not a factor.
Yeah, it has to be at some point.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, you're going to play to the audience that's coming to see.
Now, would you consider stand-up comedy to be an art form?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, a lot of people just they fail to see it as that. Why do you think that is?
I think because it looks, when it's done well, it's by design looks kind of effortless. Like there is two big misconceptions I like still hear from people about how comedy works on like a basic level. Is one group of people think I just stand in front of a microphone and just talk and just say whatever comes to mind, and it's hilarious and fun. And then there's another group of people who think when I'm not on stage, I'm combing through joke books and like memorizing great jokes to come out and tell people. And it's neither one of those things. It's, there's different approaches to it, but I put a lot of time into thinking about the material I'm going to do. Developing that material over time. Like when it's performed well, it is supposed to feel kind of conversational, kind of feel off the cuff. But it is even, crowd work clips are big on social media, and there's like guys who've been like doing it forever. Like Ian Bagg is a pretty well-known guy who does like a lot of crowd work. But, you see Ian Bagg live a couple of times, you kind of like, not to say he's not in the moment or it's like a trick, but it's like you kind of see how it's done, where it's like, oh, okay. So he's got like categories of stuff that he's ready to talk about. So when he hits on one of those, he can go into this thing. And that's not to say it's not scripted or there's not things in the moment, but like it is not, just talking. He's putting a lot of work in to be able to do that. And just the idea that people sit around memorizing jokes from joke books.
No, that's insane.
That is you like in vaudeville times. Yeah, that's kind of how it was done. Like you'd have a 10-minute act of street jokes you learned, and that's all you needed, and you could tour that for a decade.
Yeah.
And once things started getting recorded, everyone's like, "Oh, we can't do that anymore." But that was over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not how it goes anymore.
Well, and I've often heard that there are a lot of deep truths and a lot of honesty in comedy. And I think maybe tying to what you just said about how neither one of those options are how you write, what I see as comedians being kind of these like philosophers of truth is that, a comedian's kind of always scanning their environment. They're always scanning the world for material. And in doing so, they tend to get a deeper understanding of the world than the average person. And I think exaggerating is important in comedy because that's how you get across a point.
Right. I mean, that's how you make the joke work sometimes. Something happening 1,000 times is funnier than something happening 10 times. I mean, I don't know that I have a deeper understanding of anything than anybody, but I think a lot about things that have happened to me and what about them is interesting and worth repeating, which, there's you came out and helped film my special that I wrote after my brother died. And I spent a lot of time. I'm like, okay, obviously I'm going to think a lot about how my brother died. Just cause I'm sure anybody who's ever lost anybody has thought about it a lot. I don't think I'm unique in that aspect, but I think I put more time into thinking about how do I make this relatable? Like what parts of this would other people understand? What about this is actually unique to me? What do I think about how we as a like culture deal with death? Like what changes do I think maybe need to get made? And I make the point in the special. I'm like, I don't have an answer. Like I didn't solve it. Like since my brother died 2016, a lot of people I know have either died or they lost somebody. And whenever that happens, it's like, yeah, I still don't know what to tell you. Like it sucks, right? Like it feels bad. It's gonna feel bad, and it will continue to feel bad for at least 7 years. Like that's where I'm at with it. And it's like I think about my brother every day. I do not think the fact that he died is funny, but you know, I think it's funny that people texted me instead of calling because it's an awkward phone call. So they're like, they thought they could get out of it by just shooting a text. But then also the joke in the special is I don't save phone numbers, so I don't know who's texting me. And that's true. Like I don't, like that's why I use still like Facebook Messenger is how I talk to most people because it logs all the conversation.
Your name's right there.
Your name and your face is right there usually. And it's like, that's great. Because I will save people's names sometimes, but I don't remember who that is. Like if I do a college gig, you know, the point of contact, I'll probably put that in my phone because then if they're calling me a day or two before, rather than just random number from Ohio, it's like, all right, Marley's calling me. Great. And then I know to answer the phone. If 2 years from now, Marley gives me a call, I'm like, I'm not going to remember this name. So, I don't know. It's you do have to look at it as why are you the one on stage talking about this thing? Where I think the idea of, oh, you can't say anything anymore. Like if I wanted to go up and just do a bunch of jokes about, you know, Black life in America, that would be ridiculous because I'm the palest person in the world. I genuinely, like growing up, there was a Black family in my town and school. And like I don't have that experience. So for me to be like, isn't it hard? I don't know. It's just me like trying to do jokes for the sake of jokes like that. I don't like it. Like just as a consumer of comedy, I want to hear material that is specific to the person telling it, which I understand there's different ways of doing it. But the people who are like just looking at the news, other than like, you know, late night writers when it's literally their job, like that's, I think late night comedy, I think serves a purpose of like getting people caught up with the news of the day, but also like making them feel a little better about it because it's on right before bed. So it's like there's a major world event, might be a little scary. Here's a fun little joke about it. Now go to bed. You got work in the morning.
Yeah.
And that I think serves a purpose. But like when stand-ups do it, it's like, I don't care. Like I don't care what you think of this thing because I don't know anything about you as a person. So that's, I get asked about a lot about like how I write material. It's like I don't like ever sit down to like write jokes.
So you tend to like material from comedians that's a lot more personal to them.
Yeah. Where like story-based stuff, or at least it's got to feel true, you know? I don't remember his name. He used to do the open mic here a lot. And so many of his jokes would like contradict one another that it was genuinely, I'm like, I don't know what parts of this are real, so I'm going to assume none of it is, and I don't care about any of it.
Yeah.
And like he was a nice enough guy, and the jokes were pretty funny, but like I never connected with it. It's like, what are you doing? And then there's guys like James McElhaney. I've been doing a lot of shows with him recently because he's like gotten very into producing shows. Where it's like, yeah, like I believe every awkward story he is trying to recount about his weird life. Like he does, he went to like a sex conference with his mom. And I'm like, yeah, I don't doubt that for a second, man. You seem like a guy who went to a sex conference with his mom. And he's one of my favorite comics to work with because it's like, yeah, I like his approach where he's like, it just loses it for me a little bit when people are like, it's probably true of any art form. If people are like, well, I'm a painter, so I got to paint and like, let's see what's popular right now. I'll paint that, I guess. Oh, people like birds. All right, let me churn out 40 bird pictures. It's like, I don't care about it. Paint a bird that you like.
You know, and it's funny you say that because I actually encounter that a lot with especially young painters who are just kind of starting out and they kind of have their own style and they know what they want to do, but then they start painting things that they think will sell faster.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, just know that makes you a pop artist. If that's what you're going for, great. But it doesn't seem like that's what you're going for. You're just trying to cater to the audience. And I always tell artists to create selfishly.
Yeah.
Because no matter what you create, no matter how wacky it is, there's going to be an audience out there for it. And just do what's genuine to you. That way you're connecting with an audience genuinely. And one of the other things I always loved about the comedy world is kind of the community of the stand-up comedians. You know, I always love just being able to hang out with stand-up comedians and just even seeing the camaraderie between them, you know, backstage or the green room. Can you talk about like the community of stand-up comedians?
Yeah, I think part of it is we travel a lot, so we're frequently in a town where we know no one or maybe like a couple people. But knowing that another person is a stand-up is like enough to have a conversation with them. And, you know, I've been in towns where like I'm doing a show somewhere or like a college gig and someone will be like, oh, hey, there's a student who's like starting out doing stand-up. They want to know if they can open. I'm like, absolutely. Now, actually, I do ask them to send tape. Cause one, I did do a show once where like a kid opened for me and like walked the entire room cause he was not good at comedy. But then it's usually like, yeah, like we have something to talk about. Especially like I'm fairly socially awkward. So when I roll up to a town I don't know anybody, I'm not really looking to like make friends in Iowa City, you know? I'm like, I'll hang out, I'll be polite to people at the club. But I don't know if we don't have like a specific thing. But then when you get there and there's two other comics on the show, and you're hanging out in the green room, it's like, oh, what's a terrible show you had recently? And we all have had one, and it is usually a fun thing to talk about.
So you guys more often talk about and ask about the terrible shows and the good shows?
Yeah, I think newer comics will sometimes try to like brag about a great set that they had to like ingratiate themselves to other comics. And it's like, we don't care. We want to hear about a time you bombed. Like that's more fun for us. I would honestly, I would rather watch my friends really eat it on stage sometimes than do great. And because it's fun, like it is, especially like when it is a comedian friend who is great. And for whatever reason, they're having an off night. To me, a person who knows that it's not even necessarily their fault, it's real fun. It's real fun to watch Pat Jansen or whoever just like really take a nosedive in front of a crowd sometimes where it's like, yeah, he's good at comedy. It's not like I don't have to feel bad for him. Like he'll get over this show. Pat, if you're listening, I'm not using you specifically off of any show just because I mentioned you earlier and I didn't want to introduce new characters to the narrative at this point.
Do you want to talk about the new special? What it's about, how long it took you to put together?
Sure. It is called Glen Tickle Against the World Crime League, which is a reference to the never-produced sequel to my favorite movie, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. Because in the credits for that, it says, watch for Buckaroo's next adventure, Buckaroo Banzai Against the World Crime League. But that movie lost millions of dollars, so they never made another one.
Well, hey, we're in the era of legacy sequels, so you never know.
I would love it. They brought it back as comics a couple of times, and they just, I think it was 2021, published World Crime League as a novel, which I believe is getting a paperback printing, which I was surprised. I was surprised that they did it, and then I got it, and it's bad, and I was surprised that it did well enough that it's getting a paperback, but I'm happy.
Is it good bad or bad bad?
It's bad.
Oh,
like,
no.
Buckaroo Banzai, the movie, has problems. It is like a movie that they made in 1984 with not enough money, but it had like grand ideas that like, if you're on board with the movie, you're like, well, I can see what you're trying to do, you know? The book, it feels like he's just been writing it since 1984 and at no point stopped. It is very long. The audiobook is 24 hours long.
Oh my God.
And I listen to audiobooks constantly, driving to Nashville or whatever. It took me 6 months after I got the audiobook because I got the print version, was having a hard time getting through it. I'm like, let me get the audiobook. I'll burn through it on a road trip. But I could only listen to it for like 20 minutes at a time, and I would just get mad that it wasn't better. And part of it might be really high expectations on my part.
Is it very dry?
Yes. There's a novelization of Eighth Dimension that is also like pretty dry. I've described it as like it feels like reading the Wikipedia page for the movie. Because both books are told through the perspective of the least interesting character, Reno. and it's the novelization of the movie. There's like stuff in it that they couldn't put in the movie that like you're getting more out of the experience. But this other one, it's just there's a lot. I didn't enjoy it. But I do think it is like the perfect movie to try to do now, because it's like a Doc Savage like format where it's like you have the guy, right? He's got a team. The team's made up of a bunch of different people. So it would be the easiest thing in the world to bring it back. He's supposed to be half Japanese, half American. In the movie, he's just Peter Weller. So it's like you get a Japanese American actor in there. He's got a diverse group of friends, because in like the narrative of these characters is like he has been having adventures this whole time. He's picked up a team of people along the way. So it would make sense that they are from all over the world and they are all of diverse backgrounds. And then they're fighting, in the eighth dimension, it's the Electroids, but this is too much Buckaroo Banzai talk. But I think it would fit really well for like a 2023 style reboot. And I also love it that if they did do that, if they cast a Japanese American actor to play Buckaroo Banzai in a reboot, a bunch of right-wing people would be mad about it and be like, he's not. He is. The first sentence in the opening crawl is Buckaroo Banzai, born to an American mother and a Japanese father. Like it's not like a small detail. It like framed the whole development of the character. It's weird that it's Peter Weller and not a Japanese American actor.
It's like the whole Snow White thing right now, where it's like Disney stole Snow White, so like any argument is invalid.
Yeah, it's all made up, man. It doesn't matter. I took the title for the special from that, because when I was doing the credits for Good Grief, it was around the time that I found the movie. So it's like, oh, it's really funny to me that in the credits they said that they were going to come back in a movie that never got made. I'm just going to say, so in the credits for Good Grief, it says, watch for Glen Tickle's next adventure, Glen Tickle against the World Crime League. And then when it was time to do another one, it's like, well, I don't have a better title. Like
I remember that now.
Yeah, I'm like, I might as well just use that one. And then they put the book out and stuff. It's like, well, I'll stick with it,
So did you film the new special?
Yeah, we shot it in April at Steel Stacks in Bethlehem, where I did my first album. I didn't want to repeat a location, but I talk about in the special, I talk about why I did it there, and it's because people think I live in Pennsylvania because I do so many shows, like here at the Alternative Gallery, over there at Steel Stacks. Like I perform in Pennsylvania all the time. Very rarely do I perform in New Jersey.
Well, and I have to note to listeners here, your shirt says New Jersey, New Jersey, New Jersey.
Yeah.
I think you're really trying to drive this point home.
Sure. I mean, it is just the one that I pulled out of the closet today, but I actually have a couple New Jersey themed t-shirts that I did buy because like I've been doing now material about being from New Jersey to try to like solve this problem of people thinking I live in Pennsylvania where I don't. And it's like, oh, you should do a riff on the Carlin album. What am I doing in New Jersey? Doing what am I doing in Pennsylvania? I should. But I talk. So I've lived in Jersey my whole life. I have at various points tried to leave it and like specifically to go live in Bethlehem. And my wife's like, no. So now it's like, all right, I'm here. I'm going to bring it up more because a lot of people think I live in Pennsylvania. And I think it's because I do so many, like I've had like a few different monthly shows at Steel Stacks over my 13, almost 14 years of doing comedy. So people are like, oh yeah, he must just live in Bethlehem. He's always talking about shows that he's doing there. So I'm like, no, I need to start doing material about being from New Jersey so that people know where I live. And then I'm like, why does it matter? It doesn't really. It's just, it gives me another thing to talk about besides just my kids on stage. So I have the material that I developed for the special. A lot of it is ways that I can get away with mentioning that I live in New Jersey in a way that feels organic because it builds up to the bit towards the end where I talk about everyone thinks I live here in Pennsylvania. And then it's a lot of stuff that like came out of the pandemic. It's not like COVID jokes. It is just kind of the results of COVID, where the opening of the special, I talk about how most of the shows that I've done in the past 3 years have been performed from a shed in my yard because that's where I do Zoom shows from. And it's like, well, that's because of COVID, but it's not like jokes about wearing a mask or whatever, you know? I mentioned it.
Those jokes are a little too obvious at this point.
I mentioned it a few times, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's gonna date it. Like
Very quickly, yeah.
pretty quickly. And not that I think comedy needs to, be eternal or whatever. But I don't do a lot of topical material. There's a reference in the special to when Ted Cruz left Texas because it was snowing to go to Mexico instead of, staying there and doing his job. But it is because that storm factored into another story I was telling. And it's like, it seemed relevant to be like, so this storm, like my wife ordered chickens through the mail, like alive chickens that now live in our back, or were gonna live in our backyard, but they got delayed because of a storm. So I'm like, it wasn't just because it was raining. This was like a historic event. Like Texas shut down. That's why the chicks got delayed.
Wow.
And it's like, well, it seems dumb not to mention that. Like It was a big deal. So I listen to like a lot of very old like Jack Benny is one of my favorite comedians. And, if you listen to the Jack Benny program, you're not going to get all the references to stuff, but like you'll understand the structure of the joke. So, assuming anybody is listening to my stuff in 30 years, if they're like, who's Ted Cruz? I would love it if people didn't know who Ted Cruz was in 30 years. I would love it if people forgot tomorrow. I hate that.
They're definitely going to forget about Ted Cruz.
He's and I do like him as a target in comedy because everyone agrees. Like even Republicans are like, yeah, actually, we don't like him either.
I like how Billy Mack from when he was running the coffee shop here, he always referred to him as a Zodiac killer.
Yeah. I think he's like the Republicans' Bill Maher, I think. Like Bill Maher's not a senator, so it's a little different, but like even Republicans are like, yeah, we actually don't like Ted. And like liberals, we don't like Bill Maher. We're amazed that either of them have jobs. But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I could have taken that out in an attempt to like make this special last forever. But it's like, storm's kind of a big deal. I think.
But you know what? The fact that you don't do topical stuff kind of makes it a little special then.
I do. There's also kind of in passing reference to Roe v. Wade getting overturned. But it's like, that's another thing where it's like, I don't know. I'm a dude. I'm done having kids. Like it affects me. It affects everyone. But like, I don't know that I need to be the one going out there and railing against the Supreme Court for 10 minutes in a special. But there's a joke about how like my parents, they've stopped admittedly, but like were for a while there, like being like, oh, you gonna have more kids? Have more kids. Come on, more grandkids. And then eventually it's like, shut up. And so the joke is like, well, I say it like it's going to be strangers approaching me on the street. Like, oh, I'll have more. It's just my parents. And recently the Supreme Court for some reason. And like, that's the level of like topical I want to be, where it's like, I will take like a passing glance at something and I don't need to like dive into it.
A joke like that, you're testing who's awake in the audience.
Yeah. And it's sometimes the people who are awake are mad. Yeah, there's a couple jokes like that where it's like, as a guy who works clean, I don't like billing myself as a clean comedian because I think it has weird connotations. Because sometimes people don't really mean clean; they mean like straight and white. Like you could be a clean comedian if you go up and you're doing like a lispy gay guy voice to make a joke. Ha ha ha! Everyone's laughing along. If you are a gay man and you like tell a joke about your husband, the same audiences will be like, that's not clean. It is. I don't understand why, like, we need a better word than clean comedy. And I don't know what it is, but my goal in working clean most of the time is like, I don't want people mad at me at the end of the show. I don't care. If you're going to get mad at me because I was mean to Ted Cruz, I don't care if you specifically are mad at me because you're not someone I care about your opinion. But especially like as a guy who does a lot of corporate stuff or colleges where people aren't coming to see me specifically a lot of the time, I'm like, I always look at it as like, I'm invited to this place. to entertain this group of people. It is my job to make sure everyone has a pretty okay time while I'm on stage. If it gets to the point where most of the shows that I'm doing, people are coming to watch Glen Tickle specifically, I might change that up a little bit. But that's how, like, I complain about Republicans and Ted Cruz and stuff a lot on social media. And then sometimes people who know me from, seeing a clean comedy show with me, and they're like, oh, I'm surprised. Like, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Leave then. Like, when I do a show, I'm coming to you. If you find me on social media, you're coming to me. If you don't want to follow my social media, that's fine. I don't mind. You don't have to.
It's pretty easy, people.
It's going to be mostly like stand-up clips and jokes about my kids. And then sometimes it's going to be me being mad at a Republican for doing a thing. And if you don't like it, that's fine. There's so many great reasons to not follow people on social media.
Absolutely. So how can people listen to the new special? Do you prefer they stream it? Do you prefer they purchase a physical copy?
To watch it, it'll be on my YouTube channel on September 15th. The audio will be streaming places eventually. I don't have a date for that yet because I want to drive everyone to the YouTube page for a while first. But before the end of the year, the audio will be streaming. I'll have CDs at shows and stuff. I don't know if I'm going to be selling CDs like online just because they're a pain to ship and stuff.
Well, keep it special for right now. Let people purchase it in person at a show.
Yeah.
More reason to come out and see Glen Tickle.
Yeah, I'm in the process of like doing the CD out, like the artwork and stuff, and then breaking out the tracks from the.
And then what's your website and your social medias that people can follow you?
If you just go to glentickle.com, it's one N, and then just at Glen Tickle across all social media. I'm not on Twitter anymore, but Threads, Blue Sky, Mastodon, all the new Twitters. I'm on all of them. I think Threads is the only one I really use with any frequency because the rest, like Mastodon's complicated. It doesn't open for me half the time. Blue Sky, it's just like the same 12 people whenever I check it, and they're all like fighting about something new. And it's like, I don't.
Yeah, social media gets tiring in that way after a while.
Yeah, Threads is like boring, but it's not annoying to be on. Yeah, it'll get there.
Yeah. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with about Glen Tickle and the world of comedy?
Just find comedy and art that you like, and support it. Just because you don't like, a friend of mine, he's like, I don't like stand-up comedy. I'm like, no, you don't like the stand-up comedians that you've seen. That's like me saying like, oh, I don't like painting because I saw a couple bad ones. So now the whole thing is dumb. Like sometimes you got to put a little work in to find the stuff that you like. You might not like stand-up comedy. That's fine. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody dance in a way that has made me feel anything emotionally, but keep at it.
You never saw that Always Sunny episode where Mac does the dance?
No.
Oh, it's beautiful. You gotta
That's
watch
one
it.
that missed me.
You got to see it. It's really special. Well, Glen Tickle, thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Always great to see you, and hopefully we can go on a road trip soon.
Let's.
And I cannot wait to hear the special. Everyone check it out, September 15th, glentickle.com. And thank you for visiting the Art Bazaar, Mr. Glen Tickle.
Thanks for having me.